For most of my life, I felt ashamed of who I was. Not a little, not occasionally, constantly. A low, quiet, ever-present hum of shame that followed me everywhere I went for almost 60 years. It was there when I woke up. It was there when I went to sleep. It was there at my own wedding. It was there when I held my children for the first time. It was there in church, in the grocery store, at work, at family dinners. A constant background feeling that something about me was fundamentally wrong. That if people knew the truth, they would be disgusted. That I was, at my core, something shameful. And I want to tell you today that I don't feel that way anymore. The shame is gone. Not managed, not suppressed. Gone. And it took me until I was almost 70 years old to get here. But I got here. And if I got here, you can too. So let me tell you how. But first I need to tell you where the shame came from, because you can't get rid of something until you understand what it is and how it got inside you. And here's the most important thing I learned, the thing that changed everything for me. The shame was never mine. I didn't create it. I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. It was given to me. It was installed in me when I was a small child by a world that had decided long before I was born that people like me were wrong. And once I understood that the shame was a foreign object, something that had been put inside me rather than something that grew out of me, I could finally start the work of taking it out. Let me take you back. I was a little boy in the 1950s and 60s, and in that world, in that time, there was no such thing as a gay child who was loved and accepted for who he was. It didn't exist. The very idea was unthinkable. So from the youngest age, before I even understood what I was, I absorbed the message that whatever I was feeling, whatever made me different from the other boys, was bad, shameful, dangerous, to be hidden at all costs. I learned this not from one big event, but from 1,000 small ones. The way men talked about other men, the slurs that got thrown around the schoolyard, the disgust on my father's face when a certain kind of man appeared on television, the jokes, the warnings, the silence around the topic that somehow communicated more than any words could. By the time I was 10 years old, I had received the message loud and clear. There is something inside you that you must never let anyone see. And that something is the worst thing a person can be. Think about what that does to a child. Think about carrying that at 10 years old, at 12, at 15. You are at the most formative time of your life, the time when you're figuring out who you are and whether you're okay. And the answer the world is giving you about your deepest self is no. You are not okay. You are wrong. You are shameful. And a child can't argue with that. A child doesn't have the tools to push back and say, actually, the world is wrong about me. A child just absorbs it. A child believes it. And that belief becomes the foundation that the rest of his life gets built on. Everything I became, the marriage, the career, the performance of normalcy, all of it was built on that foundation of childhood shame. I spent 50 years constructing an elaborate life designed to hide the thing I had been taught to be ashamed of since before I could even name it. Now here's the cruel trick of shame, and I want you to understand this because it's the key to everything. Shame doesn't go away when the circumstances change. You would think that once the world became more accepting, once being gay became legal and visible and even celebrated in many places, the shame would just dissolve. But it doesn't. Because the shame was never about the outside world. It became part of my internal wiring when I was a child. It became part of how I saw myself at the deepest level. And changing the laws, changing the culture, changing other people's attitudes, none of that automatically rewires what got installed in you at age 8. That's why you can have a gay man who is fully out, fully accepted, surrounded by loving people, living in the most progressive city in the world, and he still feels ashamed. Because the shame isn't responding to his current reality. It's responding to a child's understanding of the world that never got updated. I came out at 58. And I genuinely thought that coming out would end the shame. I thought that once I said the words, once I stopped hiding, once I started living honestly, the weight would lift and I'd finally feel free. And there was some relief, yes. The exhaustion of hiding lifted, but the shame was still there. I came out and I still felt deep down that I was something to be ashamed of. I would walk into a gay space and feel ashamed. I would tell someone I was gay and feel ashamed. I held my partner's hand in public for the first time, and along with the joy there was this hot flush of shame, this instinct to pull my hand back, this voice in my head saying, people are looking, people know, people are disgusted. I had done the brave thing, I had come out, and the shame didn't care. It was still running the same program it had been running since 1958. That's when I realized that coming out was only the first step. The bigger work, the harder work, was dismantling the shame itself. And that work is what I want to share with you. Because nobody told me how to do it. I had to figure it out through years of therapy, through conversations with other men, through trial and error, through a lot of pain. And I'm going to give it to you in a way that nobody gave it to me. The first thing I had to do was name it, out loud, to another person. I sat in my therapist's office and I said the words, "I am ashamed of being gay." And saying it out loud did something powerful. Because shame survives in silence. Shame lives in the dark. The whole nature of shame is that it convinces you to hide it, which keeps it alive, which gives it more power, which makes you hide it more. It's a perfect self-sustaining loop. And the only way to break the loop is to drag the shame out into the light and say it to another human being. I am ashamed. This is what I'm ashamed of. This is how long I've felt it. The moment I said those words to my therapist and she didn't flinch, didn't judge, just nodded and said, "Of course you are. Look at what you were taught." Something cracked. The loop broke. Just a little, but it broke. The second thing I had to do was separate the shame from the truth. This is crucial. I had to learn to recognize the difference between a fact and a feeling. The fact is, I am gay. That's just a fact, like having brown eyes or being left-handed. It's morally neutral. It's not good or bad, it just is. The feeling is, being gay is shameful. And that feeling I had to learn is not the truth. It's a lie I was taught. So every time the shame came up, I started practicing separating the two. I would notice the feeling of shame and I would say to myself, "That's the feeling. Now what's the fact?" The fact is there is nothing wrong with being gay. The feeling says otherwise, but the feeling is a liar. It's a recording from 1958 playing in my head, and I don't have to believe the recording. At first this felt mechanical and fake, but over time, with thousands of repetitions, the recording got quieter, the fact got louder, and slowly the balance started to shift. The third thing I had to do was grieve the boy who was taught to hate himself. This was the hardest part and the most important. I had to go back in my mind to that little boy, 10 years old, carrying a secret he didn't understand, terrified that the people he loved would stop loving him if they knew. Performing, hiding, shrinking, all before he was even old enough to know what he was hiding. And I had to grieve for him. I had to feel the full weight of what was done to that child. Because for most of my life I had been angry at that boy. I had blamed him. I had seen my shame as a personal failing, as weakness, as something I should have been able to overcome. But when I finally saw him clearly, when I finally understood that he was a child who was failed by every adult and every institution that was supposed to protect him, the anger turned into compassion. I stopped hating the boy who learned to be ashamed, and I started loving him. I started telling him, "It wasn't your fault. You did nothing wrong. You were perfect exactly as you were, and the world lied to you." And grieving for him, loving him, that's what finally started to heal the shame at its root. I want to pause here and say something to the men watching this. If you're sitting there feeling that familiar shame right now, even as you watch this video, I want you to know that the shame is not evidence that something is wrong with you. The shame is evidence of what was done to you. There's a difference, a huge difference. Shame feels like proof of your wrongness. It feels like your own soul telling you that you're bad. But it's not your soul. It's a wound. It's an injury inflicted on you by a world that didn't know better or didn't care. And injuries can heal. They don't heal on their own and they don't heal overnight, but they heal. I'm living proof. The fourth thing I did was surround myself with people who reflected a different truth back to me. This matters more than you'd think. For most of my life, the people around me reinforced the shame, even without meaning to. They lived in a world where being gay was wrong, and just being around them kept the shame alive. So I intentionally started spending time with people who saw being gay as completely normal, completely fine, completely unremarkable. My support group. Younger gay people who grew up in a more accepting world and genuinely could not understand why I'd be ashamed. Straight friends who loved me without any hesitation. And being around people who reflected back to me that I was fine, that I was normal, that there was nothing to be ashamed of, slowly started to overwrite the old programming. We become like the people we spend time with. We absorb their view of us. So I made sure to spend time with people whose view of me was the view I wanted to have of myself. The fifth thing I did, and this one surprised me, was I let myself be seen, fully. Not just out, but visible. I stopped editing myself. I stopped scanning every room for danger. I stopped monitoring my voice and my mannerisms and my behavior to make sure I wasn't being too obvious. For 60 years, I had been managing how I appeared to the world, controlling every detail to avoid detection. And that constant self-surveillance was itself a form of shame. It said, the real me is dangerous and must be controlled. So I started, little by little, letting the real me show. Letting myself laugh the way I actually laugh. Letting myself care about the things I actually care about. Letting myself exist in public without the constant editing. And every time I let myself be seen and the world didn't end, the shame lost a little more power. Because shame's whole argument is that if people see the real you, they'll reject you. And every time people saw the real me and didn't reject me, the argument fell apart a little more. The sixth thing I did was learn to recognize where shame lived in my body. Because shame isn't just a thought, it's physical. For me, it showed up as a tightening in my chest and a heat that rose up my neck and into my face. For years, I felt those sensations and didn't even connect them to shame. I just thought I got flushed easily or that my chest was tight from stress. But once I learned to recognize the physical signature of shame, I could catch it in the moment. I'd be in a situation, I'd feel the chest tighten and the heat rise, and instead of being swept away by it, I'd pause and say, there it is. That's shame. That's the old wound talking. And just naming it in the moment, just recognizing the physical sensation for what it was, took away its ability to control me. Because the worst thing about shame is that it operates underneath your awareness. It moves you, shrinks you, silences you, and you don't even realize it's happening. Once I could feel it coming, I could choose not to obey it. The seventh thing, and this is the one that took the longest, was learning to feel pride. Not the parade kind of pride, though there's nothing wrong with that. I mean the quiet, internal kind. The kind where you look at your own life and feel good about who you are. For 60 years, the idea of feeling proud of being gay was impossible to me. The best I could imagine was tolerance, acceptance, maybe one day not being ashamed. But pride, actually feeling good about it, that seemed like a fantasy. And yet that's where I eventually landed. Because once the shame faded, something had to fill the space it left behind. And what filled it, slowly, was pride. Pride in having survived. Pride in having finally told the truth. Pride in the courage it took to come out at 58 when I could have easily died in the closet like so many men of my generation did. Pride in the man I became on the other side. I'm proud to be gay now. I never thought I'd say those words and mean them, but I do. I mean them with my whole chest, the same chest that used to tighten with shame. It took years. I want to be honest about that. This was not a weekend retreat that fixed me. This was years of consistent work. Naming the shame, separating fact from feeling, grieving the boy, surrounding myself with the right people, letting myself be seen, recognizing shame in my body, and learning to feel pride. Over and over. And the shame didn't disappear all at once. It faded gradually, like a stain that gets lighter every time you wash it. There was no single moment where I woke up and it was gone. But there came a point, somewhere around my late 60s, where I realized I hadn't felt it in a while. I was sitting right here in this backyard with my partner, holding his hand, and I noticed that there was no shame. Just peace. Just two old men holding hands in the evening light. And I waited for the shame to show up the way it always had. And it didn't come. And that's when I knew. The thing that had haunted me for 60 years was finally gone. I'm not going to tell you it never flickers. Once in a great while, in a certain situation, I'll feel a little echo of it. A ghost of the old feeling. But it's a ghost now. It has no power. It shows up. I recognize it. I say, hello, old friend, and it passes. It's not the master of my life anymore. I'm the master of my life. For the first time ever. I want to talk directly to the men whose shame came from the church. Because I know a lot of you are out there and your shame has a particular flavor that I understand intimately. You were taught that being gay isn't just socially wrong, it's a sin, an abomination, something that puts your eternal soul at risk. And that kind of shame goes even deeper than the social kind because it attaches itself to your relationship with God, with meaning, with the afterlife, with everything. I grew up in that church. I sat in those pews. I heard those sermons. And let me tell you what I came to understand after a lifetime of wrestling with it. The God I was taught to fear as a child and the God I understand now are not the same God. The God of my childhood was a God of rules and punishment and exclusion, a God who created me with these feelings and then condemned me for having them, which never made any logical sense even when I was a boy. The God I understand now, if there is one, and I believe there is a God of love. And a God of love does not create a child, wire that child a certain way before birth, and then spend that child's entire life punishing him for being exactly as he was made. That's not love. That's not even justice. That's cruelty. And I refuse to believe in a cruel God. I had to separate my faith from the shame that was preached at me in that faith's name. And when I did, I found that my relationship with the divine actually got deeper, not shallower, because it was finally honest. I was finally bringing my whole self to it instead of the edited version. If your shame is religious in nature, please know that there are faith communities, churches, congregations that will welcome you completely as you are. They exist. You don't have to choose between your faith and your truth. That's a false choice that was sold to you. You can have both. It is not the truth about you. It is not a life sentence. It is a wound that can heal with the right care. And the care looks like this. Name it out loud to someone safe. Learn to separate the fact of who you are from the feeling that you're wrong. Grieve the child who was taught to hate himself and replace that hatred with love. Surround yourself with people who see you clearly. And let yourself be seen, a little more each day, until being seen feels safe instead of dangerous. That's the path. It's not easy and it's not fast, but it works. It worked for me, and I was as ashamed as a man can be. You are not shameful. You never were. Not when you were 10 years old hiding in your room. Not when you were 30 performing a life that wasn't yours. Not now. You were always exactly who you were supposed to be. The shame was the lie. And you can put the lie down. You can put it down today. You don't have to carry it for one more day than you already have. 60 years is enough. 70 years is enough. However long you've carried it, it's enough. Set it down. You've earned the right to be free of it. I want to give you one thing you can do today. Right now, after this video ends. I want you to find a quiet moment, somewhere you won't be interrupted, and I want you to say out loud, just to yourself, the words, "There is nothing wrong with me." That's it. Just say it. There is nothing wrong with me. It's going to feel strange. It's going to feel like a lie at first because the shame has been telling you the opposite for so long that the truth sounds foreign. Say it anyway. Say it again tomorrow. Say it every morning. There is nothing wrong with me. You're not going to believe it at first. That's okay. Belief comes later. The practice comes first. You're planting a seed in ground that's been frozen for 60 years, and it takes time for anything to grow. But it grows. I promise you it grows. I said those words to my bathroom mirror every single morning for 2 years before I started to believe them. And now I don't have to say them anymore because I know them. They're not words I repeat. They're just true. There is nothing wrong with me. There never was. I think about that little boy a lot these days. The one who learned to be ashamed before he even understood what he was. And I want to tell you what I tell him. I'm proud of you. You survived something that should never have happened to a child. You carried a weight no one should have to carry. And you made it all the way here, to this backyard, to this peace, to this freedom. You made it. We made it. And if you're watching this and you're still carrying that weight, I want you to know that you can make it too. The path is real. The freedom is real. And there's no age limit on it. None. If this video reached something in you, leave a comment. Tell me about your own shame if you're ready, or just say, "I'm here." You don't have to explain anything. Just knowing you're out there, knowing this reached you, that means something to me. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this road together. I've got a lot more to share. And I'll be right here, in this backyard, whenever you're ready to come back.